I'm like jamming away.
Hello, wonders. Welcome to another live. Lovely to have all of you here. And we have a surprise guest. It's Jen. It's funny, when I planned this, like the talk to do the book review, I was like, okay, I'll do it by myself. And then you were messaging me and we're like, oh, I'm really loving this book series. And I'm like, hey, want to come on and talk about it? Perfect.
So excited.
All right, so we'll let some people filter in. But first, I guess we're going to just talk about the book series a little bit. I'm just going to go over some of the details so everybody knows what it's about. And then we'll get into talk about maybe the characters, about some of the topics that it covers. And then see what else you want to talk about from there.
Cool.
And when you pop in the chat, if you want to just say hi, let us know you're here. That would be lovely. All right, so the book series we're going to talk about is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. So you'll see me, I'm going to show them all just real quick. There we go. There's my mommy.
Hello.
So the series I'm going to show you, there's an old version and a new version. So this year was the 10th anniversary of this first book being published. And actually the author, Samantha, actually restructured, I guess would be the best way to put it, the series, restructured some of the earlier books she'd written. So those are the ones I think author's preferred text or something like that, I think is what she, I was thinking it was on the book, but it's not. But yeah, author's preferred text, I think is the way they phrase it. So I'm going to just quickly show you the covers of the old books versus the new ones, so you know what to be looking out for. So this is the first book in this series. And actually, you'll see this kind of sundial motif. And this is actually based off a sundial, or the Seven Dials in London. So there's an actual place, Seven Dials, that has 7 sundials, and they all have this kind of sundial image on it. The Mime Order, which is the second one. And you'll see this kind of bug theme as well, so with the moths. And then The Song Rising, which is the third book. And The Mask Falling, which is the fourth book, which is the latest one that came out. I want to say 2 years ago now, I think. So those are those 4. I'm going to put them on the ground so I have some room. And then these are the 10th anniversary editions, which are just as gorgeous. So it actually has some pictures of some of the different places within the book. So you have Oxford and London itself, and you still have those sundial kind of. I was going to say my internet is being finicky tonight.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if it just froze for me or if I'm frozen.
No, I think it froze both, honestly.
Okay.
So this is the second one. So again, taking place in London. So you have Big Ben and the Tower there, and again that sundial motif. And then this is the third one. So it takes place partially in Manchester, if my memory serves. It's been a little bit since I've read them. There, yeah, you can see author's preferred text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just at that point of I'm in the third one now. So.
And then this is the fourth one. So this is the fourth, which takes place in Paris. You can tell Eiffel Tower and stuff there.
Very cool. Very cool. But that's not the entire series.
No, it's not. No. So there's going to be 7 books total. And their 5th one is due out on February 25th of next year. Finally. And they haven't revealed the cover art yet, but we know the title. It's called The Dark Mirror. And we know it's actually going to be taking place in Italy and like Eastern Europe. So,
exciting.
Yeah. Let's say hello to a couple people since they've popped in. So there's Catherine. So there's my mom. Hi, Mom. There's Moira. Hi, Moira. Thanks for dropping by. I do love my hardcover books. Yeah. Yes, I do. That entire bookshelf behind me there is full of like to be reads. So
Oh, that's awesome.
and then we have my Annie Chris.
Oh,
So,
hello.
get the family in the yeah, there you go. See?
Mm-hmm.
get the family in the chat tonight.
Amazing.
So, sorry, I have my little cheat sheet.
Okay.
So the books are available as audio. So you and I talked behind the scenes, but you're listening to the audiobooks right now when you're driving to and from work and stuff like that. And I've listened to the audiobooks myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really wonderful. And I was saying, with audiobooks, I love audiobooks. They make my drives absolutely wonderful. And I was looking for a new book series when you introduced me to this one. And always getting used to a new narrator for me can be a little challenging. And I remember listening to like the little snippet in the beginning and going, okay, do I like this? Do I not like this? Yeah. I love it. Right. It takes you a little bit of time to kind of get used to a new narrator, but it's fantastic. She does a wonderful job of it.
Well, I don't know if it's the same as the old versions, because I have the old version audiobooks from the older books. But if it's the same person, she's actually Irish. So Paige, who's the main character in the series, is Irish herself. So I'm glad that they chose like an Irish voice person as well, because it helps you get into that character a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the accents and all, and she does them well in the series. So it's nice.
So so they're audiobooks, digital as well. So I think like Kindle, all that kind of stuff, you can get it that way. And actually, you'll hear me mention additional reading material that the authors created, and some of that is only available electronically.
Right.
And then we also have like the hard copies, like I have. So they are available in hardcover, so like this, or there is, I think next year, or they may even be out now. There is like the paperback versions out there as well, but there'll be these new versions, these new covers, if you're looking for them.
I like you though. I love hardback covers.
I know.
There's just something about having a nice, good hardback cover book.
Like look at that.
Feels like a book.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, and I can't remember so this is the old version.
Oh, nice.
You don't get that on a paperback.
No, that's awesome. So I don't know if you're planning on sharing this or if I'm just like whatever, but
go for it.
Can you share about like your first kind of introduction to these books? And
I'm trying to actually even remember back, because it's been years.
But you had mentioned
more or less 10 years
about like how this was kind of your first introduction into like some of the things that are in these books.
Right, because the books, the main kind of gist of the books is that it's an alternate history. So it takes place in our world, but that history is kind of taken a turn at some point that is kind of diverted from ours. So alternate timeline, I guess, if you want to talk about timelines. But clairvoyance has ended up becoming illegal. And so anybody who's clairvoyant ends up going underground. So one of the big main themes is clairvoyance. And what I absolutely love about the series is that she actually, Samantha, I love her, bless her heart, but she goes into so much detail. Like her world building is insane. So this is
awesome.
So the 7 Orders of Clairvoyance, it says, according to On the Merits of Unnaturalness, which is actually some of the additional reading you can get electronically. So it's actually a pamphlet mentioned in the book, written by one of the characters in the book, but is published so you can read it yourself if you want it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And the other amazing thing she does, more so in the new versions, but she has a glossary. So for all the different terms, she has character bios of all the important characters. And then
maps
the other thing
of everything.
Yes, maps. Oh my gosh, yeah. Here, I think did I tag one of the maps here? Yeah. So you have like maps of all the different locations, and they get more ornate as you go. Like the newer books have such ornate maps in them.
Yeah. Well, and I was, with the audio, you get like PDFs, and you may in the older version too, but there's PDFs that you can get. And so the maps are so detailed. It's
Yes.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they're broken down into all of the different like sections of
Right.
the different cities, and
Yeah.
you get like an idea of what the different because, well, we'll have to get into the book itself, but
Right.
like different sections of the book are kind of ruled by different people.
Yes. Yes.
And so you get
Yeah.
to see like what all their different kind of territories are and where the borders
Yeah.
are and what's
I try to explain it to people. I'm like, it's kind of like a mob society. So they all have like different like mob kings or mob queens. They call them mime lords and
Mhm.
mime queens in this, which I kind of love the terminology.
Yeah.
But just getting back for 1 second, just back to the books, just so that everybody knows. So yeah, 7 books, 4 released, 5th one's coming out next year. There's 2 novellas. So as
Mhm.
far as reading order, of course, the novellas were released after some of the series. So as far as reading order or recommended reading order, and of course I have a screenshot from Samantha's Instagram of her recommended reading order. So there's The Pale Dreamer, which is a prequel. So you can either read it before the Bone season. I'd recommend probably reading the Bone season, then reading the prequel, because then you have context for some of the characters. And then Mime Order, Song Rising, and then there's the Dawn Chorus, which is another novella, and it fills in a bit of a time jump between the 3rd and the 4th book. And it is, in my mind, a must read, because there's a lot of trauma that Paige goes through, and that entire novella deals with her trying to process that trauma.
Wow.
So that, and then you'd read The Mask Falling. And then On the Merits, as you mentioned, like it's a digital book, so I think it was very limited released in paper. I hope to maybe find a copy someday, but as of right now, you have to get it on like a Kindle or an ebook or PDF of some
Mhm.
sort in order to read it. And I think you have it on your computer, so maybe we'll pull that up later and show people what it
Sure,
looks like.
sure. Yeah, I've got it. And I have to say, I haven't read through that whole part yet, but reading it has shed
Yes.
so much light on the different things, the different, clairs that they
Yes.
have. But it also sheds so much light on the author
Yes.
and his um, his thought process, his understanding, his lack of understanding, all of that.
Yes.
It's really quite brilliantly done.
Yeah, because I think you messaged me about it, and I'm like, yeah, you can't fit ether in a box, is the way I think I phrased it. But,
Yeah, yeah, I love that.
yeah, it's a very human thing to
So
do to try and categorize it.
yeah, well, you talk about ether. Why don't can you explain, like, how that fits in and the way that she
Yeah.
uses ether in the book?
So this is gonna be me trying to like get in mind frame of the book. So with this, so because everybody's clairvoyant, of course, much like in our world, people can see or use it in different ways. We don't all have the same gifts. So spirits, using spirits, so they'll actually, in the book, some of the people are able to wield the spirits, so use them as like shields or as weapons, things like that. They have what they call binders, which are actually able to basically, if they know the ghost or the spirit's name, they can write it down, and then that spirit has to do their bidding, basically. So using that ether as well, there's people that card reading like we do,
Mhm.
bibliomancers, so people using books, so more or less like our world, just maybe a little bit speaking actually from our side of things more than the layperson, I guess. I don't know how to describe that otherwise.
So,
But
let's
like,
back up for a minute, 'cause
yeah.
in the book, there is not everybody is a voyant.
No.
Right? And so you've also got, like, the Amorotics, which
Yes.
don't have
Yeah.
any buoyant powers,
Right. They're
right?
you're a typical person, or if you're talking Harry Potter, it would be the Muggles. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that, right? And so they, are like, they're trying to get rid of the voyants,
Right. Yes.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, And so there's this, like you said, this underworld kind of thing that's happening, which is super cool.
Mhm.
Where they're kind of like they're still doing their thing, but in the underworld itself,
Yeah.
because of Jackson's On the Merits,
Yes.
they've gotten this whole kind of class system
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
on the Clairs, and they've decided some are better than others,
Mhm.
and all of
Well, and
that
some are
kind of stuff,
outright taboo.
and some are outright taboo. That was a super cool, like,
Yeah.
thing to kind of read, because 'cause you're talking about, cards and things like that, but there's so many, right? And they
Right.
talk about, like, using fire and using water, using ice, using, like, all of these different kind of things, but
Right.
then there's the ones that use
Body parts.
aspects of the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he calls them vile augurs, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually come into play a bit in the later books. Spoiler. Um,
Spoiler alert! Yeah.
my mom said, "I see the ether more like an aura net, be like the
Mhm.
internet, but it's the aura net."
The aura net. Yeah. Well, and it's neat that you say that because, when we talk about in life, we talk about, like, the crystalline grid,
Right.
right? And we
Exactly. Yeah.
talk
Yeah. Yeah.
about how we're all connected to it and how we all have that capacity to kind of tap into it with different energies and
Mhm.
things like that. And so when you say that, that's kind of how I see the ether too. It's like the astral, it's that, like,
Yes.
ability for us to kind of tap into, all of these
Well,
abilities.
and I think the book too covers like I mean, talk about what's going on in our world right now. I mean, in the book, they're, as you said, trying to find these, voyants because they see them as, evil and they must be gotten rid of, destroyed, whatever. But they have scanners that are trying to basically detect these people. And like to think that, that could happen. No, that could happen. There's you think about
Mhm.
it, this kind of some of the stuff that's going on right now that it's very, almost seems like a very real possibility that
Yeah.
that's something that could happen.
Mhm. Well, just yeah, I mean, so much about where the world is going with technology
Yeah.
and all of that. Like, who knows what we'll be able to detect as we go.
So Moira had a quick question. Yeah, who's the author and best book to start with? So I would highly so the author is Samantha Shannon.
Mhm.
She's there. And the Bone Season's the first book I would recommend to start with, and then you can either read the rest of the series and then the novellas, or basically kind of read them in between. What I'll do is actually once we're done with the live, I'll actually post in the comments the recommended reading order, and then that way you guys can have that to refer back to.
Awesome.
Yes, and yeah, the hidden in ATMs. Yeah, they get
Oh
to
my
that
god.
point where
Mhm.
there's no real safe. No, they. I think one of the lines in it is so the city or the um it's not, I guess, a country technically because it is still a United Kingdom. But anyway, so it's Scion is kind of like the ruling government. Um, but I think the line for them is no safer place. But it's no safer place for those that aren't different, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Gosh.
so we mentioned Jackson. So maybe we'll talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the characters or like the main characters. I made a few little notes about kind of some of the main characters. There's so many characters. I mean, I love, and every single one of them has their own little personality.
Yeah.
But the main kind of focuses on Paige, who is the main character. It's written from her point of view. And she is part of this group called the Seven Seals. So you were talking about them, we were talking about it kind of being a mob society. So these different areas of London
Yeah.
are ruled by different mime lords or mime queens. And so the leader of the section that they're in, the Seven Dials, so that's where the sundial comes from on the front of the book, is Jackson Hall, who is like my favorite character out of the entire series. He's one of those like love to hate
Mhm.
characters. And then there's a 6 others. So there's Danica, Zeke, Eliza, Nadine, Nick, and then Paige herself. So that's the 7. And you really do, over the series of the books, get to kind of know each of these characters. You learn backstories, so how they came to know each other, how they came to meet. Like, for example, Nadine and Zeke are brother and sister, and they're actually from, I guess, what you would classify as the free world. So they actually were, I think they're American, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. Or
it was actually an interesting thing to follow, because it seemed like maybe they were like half brother sister or something, because he was like from South America somewhere, but she was American. So I think that there was like some kind of something there. But it was so interesting thinking about like that idea even of the free world, right, where Cyan isn't yet. And then like all of this that's kind of happening in Europe, basically.
Well, and speaking of Zeke, he's considered what they call an unreadable. So we still don't know what he's about. So we don't know if he's just something that they've never seen before, if he's had so much trauma that it's been blocked off, which is, doing, my own spiritual journey. I'm like, that's something that could realistically happen. Working through blocks, even, with myself. So it's interesting just seeing like, okay, what has happened to him that he is so like shut off that they know he's a voyant, but they don't know, who, what, where, or why.
Well, and the unreadables are so neat, just in that like they're not classifiable, and they're not like, you just I love that. So
let me see. Oh, the other thing, so clairvoyance illegal. Anything that has to do with clairvoyance is illegal. So books, music, anything that even like mentions something anywhere, even like linked. So I think they talk about, I'm trying to remember some of the music. So like the Danse Macabre,
just,
I think is one of the
jazz and stuff like that. Like there was like
Frankenstein, you wouldn't have that.
It was so much of it is like contraband or not permitted. Well, and what's interesting too, like, is because some of the voyants need to have something in order to channel the ether, right? So like card readers need their cards, right? Or some need mirrors, or some need like specific kind
they
of
talk
things.
about like, I think like needles and stuff like that.
And so they've got their own market, they've got their own kind of community that allows them the opportunity to actually get these things, because they're not allowed in science.
And that underground society is actually thriving. Like, it's almost like they'll put humans anywhere and they'll find some way to thrive.
Like, they'll find some way to thrive, and destroy each other, sadly. I don't know.
So one of the big things in the book that you hear about right away is that there's people disappearing. And so come to find out basically that there's these other, we'll call them, I don't know if we want to call them creatures, things. Beings, yes. Beings would be good, So these other beings, these other worldly beings, called, I pronounce it Rephaim or Rephaim, depending how you want to pronounce it. But that's where I always find it so hard to classify the series. I'm like, is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Like, where would you, where does it fit? Because it kind of has a little bit of everything. And so you come to find out in the first book that that's where these voyants are disappearing to, because they're actually using them basically as soldiers to protect the rest of humanity, which is just like, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then there's the Emim, which are like, to me, I've always had trouble trying to visualize kind of like what they would look like. But just the description she gives them is just like makes my skin crawl.
So, okay. So you're talking about these other kind of creatures and beings. how do they come about in the book? Like, how do we learn about them, or where do they like show up in the book? Like, as far as kind of like how.
So Paige ends up getting tracked down and captured. She ends up doing some not so good stuff that gets her kind of on the radar. She's been flying under the radar, no problem, for years. But she ends up getting caught, and then ends up being taken to Oxford. So if anybody's been to Oxford, you can actually, if you've been to any of these places, there's, again, the world building is so great. But she ends up going to Oxford, and the first thing that they end up meeting are these Rephaim. And so basically they're told to like stand in rows, don't make eye contact, basically be the subservient human. And then they basically get chosen one at a time. And these Rephaim, my understanding is like they can see aura, they can, like, they're much more attuned to that ether than even the voyants are. So they have a bit of a different understanding of it. And they also, you end up finding out, can feed off of that aura, which is very interesting.
It's really interesting because she writes it as if they're made of the ether,
right?
And then feed on the ether. So it's like, ooh, okay. Ooh.
And I'm trying to remember which mythology the series is based off of, but she actually based it off of one of the Greek myths, and I'm blanking on which one it is at the moment. So if you keep that in mind too, you have kind of, these godlike, I guess, godlike beings that, have come from, they say, the underworld, or, the netherworld. And the reason that they're there, or the reason they say they're there, is because there's been this imbalance. So there's too much spirit load on this side. So too many people that are kind of refusing to cross over. And so it's caused this imbalance. And so basically holes have been ripped open between the two worlds. And so that's why they're needing these voyants as soldiers, basically, is to protect everybody else from all this stuff that's coming through from this other side.
Yeah, super cool.
I had entities. Yeah, there's another.
Yeah, entities that are in solid form.
Yes. Well, and it can rip limbs off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I don't know like the whole Greek like kind of background of it, but I think part of it was that the different characters even were based on like specific kind of histories, or there's like a connection there.
Well, and I think a lot of the Rephaim, I'm just remembering back, it's been a little bit since I've had a chance to read through the series, but I think a lot of them are based on like the stars. So for example, the main male character in this series, other than Jackson, is Arcturus, which is a star. And so there's Nashira, who's kind of like I would consider her, I guess, the queen. So she's kind of the ruler of the Rephaim. And I believe that's also a star, or a star system, or something like that. And as we talk about humans thriving, and you said taking each other down, you really do see that when they're put in that pressure cooker environment, people will turn their backs on people like in 2 seconds if it means their life.
Yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting thing to notice, because I think we talk about like existential kind of moments, right? And Paige has many of them. Right? But really kind of coming to understand, that where she's at when she's in Seven Dials and she's living her life, under Jackson, and her view of what that even was, or what that meant for her. And then ending up in Oxford, right,
Right.
with them and kind of going, okay, like I'm questioning everything I know,
I know. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And kind of going, okay, I don't know what I believe or what I want to believe
Right.
anymore. And not wanting to believe them, but also realizing that there's something to what's happening
Right.
to her.
Right. And it's, yeah, you the whole like behind closed doors, like you just don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
who's pulling the strings? I mean, you just finished the second book, and there's a big plot twist right at the end
Oh
of
my
that
gosh.
second book.
Oh my
The
God.
first time I read it, I love just waiting for people's reactions. We're not going to spoil it because you guys can read it.
No, we're not
But
going to spoil it, but
no,
holy man.
yeah,
And, and the whole way through, you're kind of like, is it this? Is it that? Is it,
yeah,
and you just,
yeah,
yeah. Anyway. And then you're like, what?
yeah. This is
What?
jaw floor. Yeah,
And then you're like, yeah,
throw the book. Yeah,
I guess I should have seen that, but no.
yeah,
No, it
yeah,
didn't. No. So anyway, but
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a whole other
Whole other thing.
that's a
Well,
whole
and
other.
when they get to Oxford too, you end up finding out that even amongst the voyants, there's like the rookery, where basically if the people that don't make it kind of
Right.
end up. And I mean, I love the character of Liz. Um, so she's one of kind of the main card readers.
Mhm.
And I did ask, actually, I still have the picture on I think my iPad somewhere, but I actually asked Samantha at one point when she used to have her Twitter. I said, "Are we going to?" So Liz ended up basically doing a card reading for Paige, but they end up getting interrupted before we end up finding out what the last card is. And I asked her, are we going to figure out or find out what that last card is? And she says, yes, at some point we will.
Right.
But if you do tarot at all, or if you have tarot cards, like I actually went through the book and like pulled out the cards and like laid them out. And I mean, the more you understand tarot, the more you can maybe look into those meanings of like what those represent. Because yeah, there's what Samantha as the author writes about those meanings, but the more you would, I guess, maybe the more in depth you know about tarot, maybe there's other meanings there that even that run through that book, I guess. And you end up, I think, is it the third book? You end up almost getting a retelling of those cards, but it's actually, I think, one of Liz's relatives. So again, you get another viewpoint of those cards.
Oh, super cool. I haven't
Yeah.
gotten there yet, but I do
Yeah.
remember in the second book
Yeah.
having her kind of Paige reflecting on the cards
Right.
and different things that are happening. And so, like, Samantha writes it in such a way that, like, she revisits the card. She doesn't specifically put it together in that
Right.
moment, but she's
Right.
bringing it back up for you. And then when the
Yeah.
moment happens, you're like, oh, that's what
Whoa.
it was.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mhm.
It just is that her world building, like I'm
Yeah.
hoping it's going to become a TV series at some point. At one point, they had sold like movie rights to it and then TV rights
Oh,
to it, but nothing's ever
cool.
happened. It's one of those things, though, too. I'm worried that like they better do it right if they do
Yeah.
it. Maybe it's
Yeah.
better that it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's maybe one thing to look forward to in the future. So get on the bandwagon now before it becomes a big thing. But I'm trying. Actually, well, we talked. So we did mention on the merits. I think you said you have it up on your computer. I don't know if you're able to
Yeah, I have
share
it
a
on my
screen. If you maybe
computer.
wanted to delve into that a little bit, talk about maybe a little bit about the clairs.
Yeah, super cool.
And
Let's see
if
if I can.
anybody has any questions about the book too, I know we've kind of been jumping all over the place just because that's my way my brain is right now. But if you have any specific
Okay.
questions about the book or anything like that, please post.
I'm just gonna get back to the beginning of the book. There we go. On the merits.
Yeah.
Can I present? Let's see. Share screen. Share a window.
So
There
yeah,
it is.
Jackson Hall has basically authored this pamphlet. So in the book, it's a pamphlet, and it basically outlines 7 orders of clairvoyance. So I'm actually going to pull up the book. Actually, while you're pulling that up, I had tagged one of the quotes. Actually, it's from the first book, and I love it. She always puts quotes at the beginning of each of the books. But this one's actually from Charlotte Bronte, and it says, besides this earth and besides the race of men, there is an invisible world and a kingdom of spirits. That world is around us, for it is everywhere. And I get chills reading that. Like,
very cool. So I don't know. It says I'm sharing, but I don't see that I'm sharing.
Oh, here. Maybe, can I do... Huh? Nope. How about that? Nope. I'm like, it's just not good. Oh, there. Oh, wait. It's me not knowing what I'm doing. Give me a second.
It's down
here. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
It's me trying to figure out the technology.
All right, so there we go. So yeah, the way
this is bonus material, right?
Yeah. And I love that she's like, as told to, right? Yeah. It's hers.
Well, in the Spiritist Club, so the Spiritist Club up at the top is actually, it's basically a publisher run by Voyants for Voyants. So it actually comes up in the book as well.
Mm-hmm. And so this, from my understanding, this was Jackson's kind of big claim to fame.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And it basically threw everything into utter turmoil because of it too. But
it does. Yeah. And it changed, from my understanding, it changed the entire world that the entire way that the underworld was structured was based on these orders that he put out in this book.
Yeah. That there's betters, as we say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all based on rarity, I guess, right?
That's it.
So yeah, this is actually great because it's in color. So the different colors that you're seeing there are actually the different aura colors that are associated with these different types of clairvoyance.
Yeah, which is super cool. And in the book, the colors of the auras does come up.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And, being able to kind of identify with that, and also not being able to identify depending on how close certain colors are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So do you want to just go through them? How do you want to?
Yeah, sure. What I'll do is I'll pull up my book here too, just so I have them in front of the... So in the newer versions of the books, she has them... I can't remember how they list them in the additional material. But in the new books, she has them written as like a list, as a bullet point list, versus in the old books, she has them as a flow chart, or as a kind of so like this is the old version.
Bigger for that? Should I stop sharing? Because you're
no, it's all good. It's all good. I can. I think I can do that real quick here. So this is the old version where she has it as like a chart, and then we have
like an org chart.
Yes. Yeah.
Literally.
Okay, so we have soothsayers, which are considered kind of the bottom of the list, as far as like kind of the most common. So they require ritual objects, which in the book they call them pneuma. So that's where you're talking about like cards or bones or needles or mirrors or anything like that to connect with the ether. Most often used to predict the future. So you have things like bibliomancers, so people that use books. You have like crystallists, so use crystals. Then you have actually some that are kind of cross. So we talked about those like vial augurs or the augurs. So there's some that kind of cross between those two.
Yeah.
We were talking backstage. I actually went through and like figured out what all these are. All the ones she lists. And I think actually in On the Merits, she tells you what some of them are. I think she actually...
Yeah. So let's get in.
Yeah. So that's the foreword that Jackson wrote, basically.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So the pneuma, right, that you talked about. So yeah, the soothsayers. So you've got seers, common soothsayers.
Yeah. So those are the two kind of titles that differentiate. And then augurs, common augurs and vial augurs. That's what you were saying. So the augurs use organic matter or elements to connect with the ether. So most often used to predict the future. So again, so it's that difference between a man-made object versus a naturally occurring object. So that's your big difference between your soothsayers and your augurs, and that's why there's almost like a cross connection between some of them. So again, with the book here, I'm just going to show it really super quick. But you can actually see with the chart style, there's actually lines that cross between the two.
Oh, yeah.
You actually have that visual connection.
Very cool. Yeah, because he does mention certain ones in both.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that's interesting. And it's really interesting too, because he's not just factual. Like, he's very much putting his opinion in.
Oh, he's so biased. Yeah.
And then the opinion is like what becomes kind of law for them.
Right.
And it's just fascinating to see.
And within the fandom, sometimes people will be like, one of the questions will be like, if you could be anything, what would you be? And it's really funny because, like, you'd think, I'd want to be like one of the, like, rarer ones that's considered like better. But looking at all of them, I'm like, I'd probably be an augur because, like, I love pearls. So I would use, the reflections in the pearls almost like a crystal ball and be able to scry for whatever answers I needed. So or like a bibliomancer because, I love my books. So I'd be perfectly happy to use books. And then, so we have the mediums. So connect with the ether through spiritual possession, subject to some degree of control by spirits. So this is one that we can definitely relate to within our own, within our own world for sure. Like, we do have, the soothsayers and stuff. So, you talk about, the whole crystal balls or tarot reading. But then you do have the mediums. So you have trance mediums, and then you have your restive mediums. And so I think that trance medium versus restive medium would be almost like what we would call like a full trance channel versus a mediated channel.
Right.
So one example is it it's Eliza that is a medium, but she does art. So she actually lets dead, past, deceased artists embody her, and then she paints.
Yeah.
Or lets them paint through her.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible thing in the book that she has to experience too, right? Because there's an exhaustion that comes from that.
I feel so sorry for her all the time. I also like the fact that there's always like the one artist just moping in the corner.
That is a really neat kind of thing too that she weaves in, is like the spirits and their presence, even if they're
just
not
hanging. Yeah. You say hi as you walk up the stairs,
Not today. I can't do. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, so they've got the art medium, physical medium, a psychographer.
Which is, I think, writing, if I remember correctly. So basically like the art, but doing written language. So I guess that would almost be like when we're doing automatic writing. I guess it'd be right.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we have the sensors. So sensors privy to the ether on a sensory and linguistic level. So can sometimes channel. So you have gustants. So we talk about the different clairs. So gustants. So like tasting. You have sniffers, or like clairs. I think it's all clair. Or I think it's orulence or something like that. I know Tanis just calls it clairsniffians, but
that's funny.
And then polyglots. So they're speaking, I guess, what we would consider almost like speaking in tongues, or speaking light language, speaking in spirit. So it's a language other than, common English or the common language. And then you have whisperers, which I think are, again, kind of along that line, but I think whisperers are more, trying to think of the difference. I don't know if it actually goes through what the difference between the two are.
Yeah, so it's got okay, so the gustants.
Yes.
Right, which you were talking about. So this is the gut and the tongue. That's interesting. Whisperers. So they hear but possibly not speak or even understand.
Okay. That'll be our clairaudience.
Clairaudience.
Yeah.
right? And then we've got the smelling, which is clairalience.
Okay.
Um,
There you go.
and then clairgustance, right?
Right.
So it's interesting because she uses some of the terms that are
Right.
similar and then
Yeah.
some that are a little bit different. But yeah,
And
it's
what's really nice is in the later books. So I think in book 4, especially, you actually end up meeting one of these sniffers.
oh
So she
cool.
does pull in some of those, like some of the types that she covers. There are people that you end up meeting that do have these, and you get to kind of experience through them what it's like to have that as a gift.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Um, awesome. Because what comes to mind for me, just in the work that I do, is in human design, we have
Yeah.
different things that are kind of our superpowers in the way that we sense things. And it is
Right.
very similar to these clairs, right? Because there's
Right.
taste, there's smell, they're all a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like even in kind of our design of how we're made, we each have an affinity to one of these things.
Right.
So I think that that's really cool too.
It'd be interesting too to actually. It'd be interesting. I don't know if you'd be able to somehow do it, but like figure out like what human design Jackson is.
Oh golly.
Would
Yeah,
he be a
I would have
manifesting
to
generator? I don't know.
I would think he's probably a manifester.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the way that he is, and
Yeah.
he's like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and
Right.
you all
Screw
don't.
everybody. Get
Everybody
out of
else
the
be
way.
damned. I'm
Yeah.
doing me. Right? And really kind of he has that, because manifestors have that kind of closed and repelling aura, but that's
Yes,
also
and he
very
does.
intriguing, and he
Yeah.
has that, right? And so he walks into a room and people do go, "Oh shit, what the heck has he
Yeah.
done again?"
Yes.
Right?
That's actually a perfect reaction. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, if I had to just like off the cuff say
Yeah.
it, that's what I'd go
Yeah.
with.
And then we have guardians. So have a higher degree of control over spirits and can bend ordinary ethereospatial limits. So this is,
Mm.
for example, so Jackson is under this umbrella because he's a binder.
Right.
So actually, I think is it mentioned in the first book or the second? But he basically Jackson himself actually ends up carving the names of the spirits into his skin. So he's like I'm picturing all these scars and stuff on his arm because he's of course
Which
writing
is
in blood.
fascinating because he talks about the vile augurs and how horrible they are because they
Yet he
use
does that.
blood to do
Yeah,
their magic, and he uses blood to do
right,
his. But
right.
that's somehow okay when
Oh,
this one's not okay.
well, and you just made me think too, because we talk about when working with spirit, like there being different temperatures. Well, one of the things you find out with Paige is that she has an interaction with a poltergeist, which is like freezing cold. And
Mhm.
then you do hear them. They bring in like angels and stuff like that too, or archangelics, or like kind of protective guardian angels and stuff like that, and them all having the different temperatures as well.
Yeah.
Um, so can kind of tying in that component of it, which is just so interesting.
Mhm. She did a phenomenal job, like you said, with the world
Mhm.
building, but, like, even just the symbolism that's used for different
Yes.
things. Like, in the second book, just flowers, right? And the
Yes, the
symbolism of
language of
flowers
flowers. Love
and
that.
how each one represents something, and they have to be really like, they send messages with flowers, and, like, it's just
Mhm.
a really neat deeper understanding of the way that they communicate and how things, that have had meaning, still have meaning for them, but that, in our world, we've kind of lost some of that.
Right. Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, like where we're talking about like alternate timeline. So in the timeline of the book, I mean, it's kind of the whole like I wish, but like they're still wearing kind of like it's our technology and stuff like that. But then they're wearing Victorian era, basically clothing,
Yeah.
which I'm like dream because I'm like all cottage core or whatever they call it. But like,
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's fantastic, like, even, noticing the bringing back of things that we don't even still use a lot of the
Right.
times today, like how they listen to music and all that kind of stuff, and
Right.
so
Yeah. It's a record player, right?
yeah, and so it's, well, it wasn't even like it's the record player, but it's like the I don't even remember the name.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
even
Gramophone. There you go.
gramophone.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, it's a really neat read as like they're bringing in these different things and you're like, oh,
Well, and I think it's mentioned, like it just popped in my head, but I think like the electricity and the technology and stuff is actually what's attracting these other creatures to come over somewhat. Because if I remember correctly, in Oxford, they don't have any like actual like electric lights and stuff like that because that energy that electricity and stuff creates. I mean, we feel it every day as ourselves. You know,
yeah,
you really, really notice it when you have a power outage and just everything goes quiet and there's just that stillness.
there's not that hum.
Yeah.
Interesting. I haven't gotten there yet, so that'll be an interesting thing
Hmm.
to see. Like I'm at that
And
place
then
where they're coming, but
you're coming.
they're coming.
And
Okay,
then,
so
so we have two more. Yeah. So Furies, which are subject to internal changes when connecting with the ether, typically in the dreamscape. So there's this concept of the dreamscape. So I think I would actually, when I was messaging you when we were just talking about the books, I said, oh, it's kind of like when we talk about our sanctuary. So one of the things I learned when I took a channeling class was basically having this place that you can go mentally that's separate from, here. It's kind of out here somewhere. But that's basically, I've also akin it to like a mind palace. If you've seen the BBC version of Sherlock, they hook up out a mind palace. Yeah, right. Such a good theory. Um, but there's this dreamscape. So it's basically actually, I think I marked the page. So yeah, it's basically, I'm gonna make myself big here again for just 2 seconds. But
yeah,
you have these kind of barriers. So there's that outside, and then as you get closer and closer to that kind of central sanctuary, which I would consider that sunlit zone.
right.
And so the spirit kind of connects or can be used through that. And so in this case, there's the unreadables. So we talked about that with Zeke. And then you have Sibyls and Berserkers. So they're a lot like the mediums in the sense that the spirit kind of takes hold of them, but they're almost to a violent extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's an outward like explosion or burst of energy almost, or it seems to be that way.
I think we get the ability to see some of this without knowing that we're seeing some of
Right.
this. There's snippets before you
Mm-hmm.
actually learn about what it is, but you see like there's something here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something
Mhm.
not quite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have the jumpers. So this is the kind of rarest, I guess, according to Jackson. So they're able to affect the ether outside their own physical limits. Greater sensitivity, and they're also more sensitive. So you have oracles,
Mhm.
but then you have dream walkers, and so Paige is actually a dream walker, and um, according to Jackson, is the only dream walker.
Right.
So we don't know anybody else that is like her. So which means she can actually kind of leave her body.
Yeah.
So when we talk about traveling like in the astral, she can do that kind of not on the fly, on the whim, but she can kind of stretch that connection with her 3D body. You actually
Mhm.
end up going through where they have to actually put her on oxygen and stuff because otherwise she's going to stop breathing because the 3D body doesn't matter anymore. She's out there having fun.
Yeah.
And then
It's a
she actually
beautiful balance that she has to
yeah,
learn, right? And so
right.
you're along with her as she's learning about her abilities and what she can do and really
Yeah.
kind of testing the limits of that. And you know, that the way the books are written, you're kind of right alongside her as she's figuring it out and as she's trying new things and all of that. So that's super cool too.
So, and then then there's an afterword.
Yeah.
An obscure writer. We all know it's Jackson.
We all know.
So I actually tabbed a couple of pages in like the old version that I thought would like almost give you guys a little like snippet. So it'll be like a paragraph or two from the book. I thought I'd read if everybody's good with that.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives a good kind of summary of the book. So I have, I think, two things I kind of tagged here. So this is chapter 1 from the first book. It's called The Curse. I like to imagine there were more of us in the beginning. Not many, I suppose, but more than there are now. We are the minority the world does not accept. Not outside of fantasy, and even that's blacklisted. We look like everyone else. Sometimes we act like everyone else. In many ways, we are like everyone else. We are everywhere, on every street. We live in a way you might consider normal, provided you don't look too hard. Not all of us know what we are. Some of us die without ever knowing. Some of us know, and we never get caught. But we're out there. Trust me. It says, I'd lived in the part of London that used to be called Islington since I was 8. I attended a private school for girls, leaving at 16 to work. That was in the year 2056. So this is kind of near history, really, or near alternate history. AS 127 if you use the Scion calendar. It was expected of young men and women to scratch out a living wherever they could, which was usually behind a counter of one sort or another. There are plenty of jobs in the service industry. My father thought I would lead a simple life, that I was bright but unambitious, complacent with whatever work life threw at me. My father, as usual, was wrong. So you end up finding out that she basically lies to her dad about what her job is. So she works for Jackson, but her kind of her lie is that she works at an oxygen bar. So like flavored oxygen. So I thought that was, and I think her father does end up finding out in the long term. Basically because she ends up getting kidnapped basically, or taken out by Scion.
A lot happens.
Yeah, a lot happens, exactly, yeah. So all clairvoyance was prohibited, of course, but the kind that made money was downright sin.
Yeah.
They had a special term for it, mime crime. Communication with the spirit world, especially for financial gain. It was mime crime that the syndicate was built on. Cash in hand clairvoyance was rife among those who couldn't get into a gang. We called it busking. So that would be, people that didn't have a mime lord to take care of them. Scion called it treason. The official method of execution for such crimes was nitrogen asphyxiation, marketed under the brand name Nightkind. Like, that's kind, yeah, being asphyxiated to death. I still remember the headlines. Painless punishment, Scion's latest miracle. They said it was like going to sleep, like taking a pill. There were still public hangings and the odd bit of torture for high treason. I committed high treason just by breathing. I love that line.
That is awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
So we've got, I guess, 2-ish minutes left. So
yeah.
Jen, do you have anything interesting coming up in the next week or two? And then I'll...
I think all of my, okay, I'm doing this and this and this and this is
good for now.
Right? So we just did our live readings on Sunday night.
Yes.
And then we've got we had our 100th
episode. Yeah, so exciting. Episodes, wow.
And then, it was super fun. And then, we've got this, and I think the next thing I've got is next Monday. At this point. So that's nice. But in between now and then, I'm going to be doing the Therapist in Conversation, and that'll get posted at the beginning of next month. And our August reading we'll do and get out for, the 1st of August. So.
Yeah, if you guys are interested, it's a Twillo lifestyle. If you go to Tanis's website, she has a membership, like a community, but the membership's free right now.
It is.
So I actually love to go and see the reading. You do like what, 21 plus card
22
reading?
cards. Yeah. So on my site, I have like the readings that we've done, but I only have the YouTube ones that are up where we do 6 card readings.
Right.
But I have all the cards we use, and I have links. So if you're like, oh, I want to check out that deck, I really like it. All the links and everything for it are right there. So you can find that. I have a whole set of like all the cards I like and that I, want to use. So if you want to check all of those out, if you've got recommendations and you're like, hey, Jen, check this deck out. Like, I'd love to hear about it. And then, there's for Twillo Lifestyle, you go on to the membership page. Not only do you get a 22 card reading for each month, but you also get access to a whole bunch of resources and stuff that is in Twillo's membership.
I think there's recipes, yoga stuff, your human design stuff.
Yeah, kinds of stuff. So it's super cool.
And then, so coming up for me, I do it about every 2 weeks, these lives. So the next one's going to be on August 11th. And it's actually going to be with Tanis. So we're actually going to talk about Reiki, what it is, how it works. And then towards the end of the session, we'll actually do a little bit of healing for whoever's in the chat or whoever's going to be watching. Just because both of us are Reiki masters, Tanis is actually my Reiki teacher. So thought, I'd kind of, we'll go over what it's all about for any of you that have those questions. So bring your questions. If you've ever had any questions you wanted answered, as far as Reiki goes, definitely bring that. And then on the 26th, so the next one after that, 2 weeks from then, I'm actually doing a tarot poetry night. So if you've tuned in to any of the past videos I've done with Heather, so Indigo Jaguar, so what ends up happening is I end up either taking prompts from people in the chat, or I end up pulling tarot cards and then using that as a prompt to write a poem.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing that on the 26th. And then the one following that is September 8th. And I'm going to be doing another deck review, but this one's a little bit different because it's the Dog Lenormand deck that I actually created myself. So it's actually one I hand drew and created. All about dog breeds.
Awesome deck. Oh my gosh, you guys have to check that out. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh,
super cool.
She says, thanks, girls. That was great. I'm super excited to read them again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what the big differences are going to be. I think we talked about it, where they go to Oxford, it feels like almost right away, versus it'd be interesting to actually give you the old version and get your thoughts on the differences.
Yeah. Hey, I'm game for that.
Game on that. And awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. And if you're interested, the book, I think it's been out long enough. You should probably be able to get it at the library. If you're going to go out and buy it, purchase responsibly. You do have, the hardcovers, paperbacks, all of that.
I feel like Haley's frozen again, but I don't know.
My internet's gonna glitch out again.
I don't know if we're both frozen or if I'm frozen, but
anyway, before we freeze again, we will say have a great night and see you guys next time. Bye.